Okay, I'd like to welcome you to yet another video, and things just keep on popping up and the events just keep on connecting, as far as dots go. If you remember, about a week or so back, I did a video regarding the now released papal encyclical via Pope Francis, and I went on to state that, and this was verbatim according to a Jesuitical website, that this encyclical is going to pattern off of prior encyclicals that not only is dealing with the environment and economics and everything, but the socialist agenda of the redistribution of goods for under natural law for the common good of all. Okay, and sure enough, as you see before you, before you here, this is the encyclical, and this is Chapter 6, Article 93, the common destination of goods. Okay, and before I get into that, I'm also going to show you a lot of quotes with other popes that have basically used the same ideology. Now, why are they using this ideology? Okay, well, what I have before you here is straight verbatim of the Vatican webpage, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, Section 2, the Ten Commandments, and they're so arrogant in their statements of changing it that they actually list the actual commandments right here on the far left. Okay, and for those that are not aware, I'm just going to sum this up quick. Is they basically what they have done is they have removed the entire second commandment. Okay, and they moved everything up one. So basically, the fourth commandment becomes the third commandment. The third commandment becomes the second commandment, and so on and so forth. And so then what they did was they took the 10th commandment and they split it in two. And this video is kind of going to go exclusively into the 10th commandment here. Okay? And which is the aspect of not coveting. Now, I apologize that this isn't verbatim from the King James Version, but if you translate the these and the thys and the thous, you pretty much get the same aspect. And the 10th commandment states, "You shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, or anything that is your neighbor's." Now, if you were to transfer this into modern times, your manservant or your maidservant would be your employees. People that work for you, or that you work for them. Okay. As far as the chain of command goes in any given workplace, rather you have people that work under you and stuff like that. You're not to covet their means, their needs of anything. Okay, you're not to want to have what they have. Okay. Now, if you go to the Ten Commandments via the Catholic Church, what they did is they just put "you shall not covet your neighbor's wife" as a 9th commandment, and "you shall not covet your neighbor's goods." Okay. But what did they leave out? Well, your house is gone, right? Your manservant or your maidservant is gone. Your ox is gone. Your ass is gone. And your ox is basically how you till the ground, your physical labor, means of equipment and these types of things. And your ass, in today's terms, would be your transportation, your vehicle. So your vehicle's gone. Okay, but what they do is they put "you shall not covet your neighbor's goods." That's kind of tricky because In recent encyclicals, you read about the destination of goods, and they talk about private property, and it sounds good. But what they do is they say, unless you can have private property, you can make the payments and these types of things, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily yours. If someone is in need, it is not a sin for them to come and take what you have because they need it. Okay? And we see a lot of things going on with this climate change aspect, and that we share all the Earth's resources, and that we have to realize that. And this is all in unison with the whole TPP thing that's going on, that pretty much has already passed, and the UN Climate Sustainable Agenda that they are going to be deciding on in September. Now, what else is happening in September is not only the Pope is going to be visiting the United Nations to address them, he's also going to be visiting the United States and speak on behalf of the American people in a joint session of Congress. And how interesting it is that you had this encyclical released, you had this TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Program, which is labeled as free trade, but what it is basically to expedite more jobs out overseas and these type of things, but it goes beyond that because it's going to affect every little aspect of your lives. Now, why? Well, because, other nations of the world have need, right? So, and that's the reason why, well, for example, your manservant or your maidservant is gone. Okay? There are other countries out there that are in need of these employment opportunities. Same thing with your ox or your ass. With your ass, your mode of transportation. You buy a car, you're making payments on it, and these types of things. Sure, you pay it off, but what's it connected to? It's connected to a license plate and these types of things. So really, do you actually own your vehicle? No, you do not. Okay? Where if someone has need of it, they can have it. If someone has need of your property, your housing, I think it's called squatting, I believe, it's perfectly okay. And it's not a sin because they're not literally stealing, because they have need. And you have to succumb to their need. All this is basically a socialist and Marxist ruse, basically, and this is how the Catholic Church operates. Alright? So, I figured I'd start you off with that. Now, before I go into the two articles within the recent encyclical, I figured it would be interesting to see what other popes have said in previous encyclicals. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Okay. And this is from Article 42 in Pope John Paul II's encyclical from 1987, Solicitudo Rei Socialis, Socialism. Okay. And it states as following. Okay, today, more than in the past, the Church's social doctrine must be open to an international outlook in line with the Second Vatican Council. The most recent encyclicals, and particularly in line with the encyclical which we are commemorating, it will not be superfluous, therefore, to re-examine and further clarify in this light the characteristic themes and guidelines dealt with by the Magisterium in recent years. Again, this is from Pope John Paul II. Here I would like to indicate one of them, the option or love of preference for the poor. Okay, basically what this is turning into is basically a extinction of the middle class, so basically taking from the poor and giving to the poor. If that makes any sense. Because the rich ain't going to suffer in this at all. Obviously, the Vatican is proof of this fact. They call the shots. This is an option or a special form of primacy in the exercise of Christian charity. Let's just replace that word Christian with Catholic, okay? To which a whole tradition of the Church bears witness. It affects the life of each Catholic Christian, inasmuch as he or she seeks to imitate the life of Christ. Which Christ? Well, if you really read between the lines, it's the Christ of Rome, the Vicar of Christ, the Antichrist. But it applies equally to our social responsibilities, and hence to our manner of living, and to the logical decisions to be made concerning the ownership and use of goods. Today, furthermore, given the worldwide dimension which the social question has assumed, this love of preference for the poor, and the decisions which it inspires in us, cannot but embrace the immense multitudes of the hungry, the needy, the homeless, those without medical care, and above all, those without hope of a better future. It is impossible not to take account of the existence of these realities. To ignore them would mean becoming like the rich man who pretended not to know the beggar, Lazarus, lying at his gate. Okay, now, all of this sounds good. This sounds right. But what has happened here is the church has taken the aspect of embracing the poor, feeding the hungry, and caring for the widows and the needy and these types of things as a forceful issue, as a something that has to be done openly. Whereas the Bible basically talks about giving alms. When you do so, do it in private, do it in secret, so that no one knows. Okay? And don't make this into your religion of some sorts, or a specific tradition, which is what's going on here. Okay? Our daily life, as well as our decision in the political and economic fields, must be marked by these realities. Likewise, the leaders of nations and the heads of international bodies, while they are obliged always to keep in mind the true human dimension as a priority in their developmental plans, should not forget to give precedence to the phenomenon of growing poverty. Unfortunately, instead of becoming fewer, the poor are becoming more numerous, not only in less developed countries, but, and this seems no less scandalous, in the more developed ones too. Here's the most interesting portion of this article here, on section 42. It is necessary to state once more the characteristic principle of Christian social doctrine. The goods of this world are originally meant for all. The right to private property is valid and necessary, but it does not nullify the value of this principle. Private property, in fact, is under a social mortgage, which means that it has intrinsically social function based upon and justified precisely by the principle of the universal destination of goods. Okay. Likewise, in this concern for the poor, one must not overlook that special form of poverty which consists in being deprived of fundamental human rights. In particular, the right to religious freedom and also the right to freedom of economic initiative. So again, private property, in fact, is under a social mortgage. So do you own your house? Well, you may make the payments, you may do all this, that, and the other. You may pay the bills, you may pay the expenses, but overall, it's not yours. You don't own anything. It all belongs to the church. It all belongs to those in need, which means that it has intrinsically social function. Okay? This is a socialism type idea based upon and justified precisely by the principle of the universal destination of goods. Okay, so again, anybody by right, by human rights, could come in, legally speaking, and take what you have, even though you've paid for it, or paying for it, even though your debts are clear of that specific item or items, but it's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. If someone is in need of it, they have the right to grasp it and take it. That's what that's saying here. Okay? Let's go ahead and take a look at another one. Thomas J. Reese, Inside the Vatican, The Politics and Organization of the Catholic Church, Harvard University Press, 1996. Quote, according to canon law, the control of all property of the Roman Church state belongs to the Pope, its supreme emperor. John W. Robbins, Ecclesiastical Megalomania, The Economic and Political Thought of the Roman Catholic Church. Quote, the Roman Catholic doctrine of private property is echoed in the 19th century communist slogan, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Okay, so for the good of the planet, for the good of all, we must share in our common goods. We may not assume the belief that we have the right to our own personal properties because they belong to your neighbor just as much as they belong to you. So what is that? Well, that's coveting anything that is your neighbor's. And they can come in and take it because they have need. And so therefore it's not a sin according to Rome. Thomas Aquinas wrote, Summa Theologies, 7th article, quote, because the goods of some are due to others by the natural law. Okay. There is no sin. Natural law is basically a Greek philosophy of also human rights. There is no sin if the poor take the goods of their neighbors, Thomas wrote, quote, in cases of need, all things are common property, so that there would seem to be no sin in taking another's property, for need has made it common. Okay, all I'm doing is reading what they're saying. Okay, this isn't no conspiracy, this isn't no conjecture, this is out of the horse's mouth. Okay? And then you see what's going on with the whole climate change thing, and you see how this is relating to end time events and these types of things. Oh, trust me, there is going to be a global warming. And they will give what these corrupt leaders in government, or these leaders in government in general, want. They want their global warming. They're going to get their global warming. That's called when the sun scorches them with fire with intense heat. Under the last plagues. So they'll get their global warming. God's a fair God. God is a just God. They want this, and so they're going to give it to them. Really kind of shows how close we may be to some very interesting events within the next couple of months. Not to mention, you have this Jubilee year, this year of forgiveness, this year of mercy. Basically, it almost seems like a deadline, which starts on December 8th and concludes in the middle of November of 2016. Well, what's going to happen at the end of November 2016? One can only know. But there is no need of fear. God is in control. He knows the end from the beginning. And God has not given us a spirit of fear. Again, from the 7th article, Summa Theologiae, not only is such taking of another's property not a sin, it is not even a crime, according to Thomas. Quote, it is lawful for a man to succor his own need by means of another's property, by taking it either openly or secretly, nor is this, properly speaking, theft and robbery. It is not theft, properly speaking, to take secretly and use another's property in a case of extreme need, because that which he takes for the support of his life becomes his own property, by reason of that need. In a case of a like need, a man may also take secretly another's property in order to succor his neighbor in need. So not only if the needy man is taking another person's private property according to his need, he can also, according to his neighbor who is in need, can take other things that belong to the rightful owner, because He needs needs. So therefore it's not stealing, even though it is stealing. And it's not sin. And of course, whose authority is this under? Obviously it's under the authority of the little horn who thinks to change times and laws. Okay? See, that's why the law of God, that's why the 10 Commandments of God is so important, because it tells you in the 4th commandment who has authority, who has the moral authority in the universe. Well, here comes this little horn, and he tells you, no, by my divine right, I have authority. I transfer this day and this day. Okay, so therefore, I have the authority, I have the jurisdiction, and therefore you will listen to me. Again, from Ecclesiastical Megalomania, canon from Catholic Church Canon 1254. Quote, the Catholic Church has an innate right to acquire, retain, administer, and alienate temporal goods in a pursuit of its proper ends independently of civil power. Canon 1260, quote, the Church has an innate right to require from the Christian faithful whatever is necessary for the ends proper to it. Or in other words, the old Jesuit phrase, the ends justify the means. Okay, now, more recent. Here is Laudato Si, recent encyclical by Pope Francis. This is chapter 6, article 93. I'm going to read the whole thing from article 93 to 95. Quote, whether believers or not, we are agreed today that the earth is essentially a shared inheritance. Doesn't that just echo what Pope John Paul II says? Doesn't that echo what Rerum Novarum under Leo XIII says? Doesn't that just echo what Thomas Aquinas just stated? Whether believers or not, we are agreed today that the earth is essentially a shared inheritance. You don't have to believe in the Catholic faith, folks. Doesn't matter. Whose fruits are meant to benefit everyone. For believers, now, this becomes a question of fidelity to the Creator. Since God created the world for everyone, hence every ecological approach needs to incorporate a social perspective. Again, there's that word social again. When you see that word social as echoed from Roman Catholicism, think of socialism and not capitalism. Which takes into account the fundamental rights of the poor and the underprivileged, the principle of the subordination of private property to the universal destination of goods, and thus the right of everyone to their use, is a golden rule of social conduct and the first principle of the whole ethical and social order. Okay, so they acknowledge private property. They acknowledge private property. But in a sense, if someone has need of that private property, it's not technically yours. It belongs to someone else. So in principle, they acknowledge private property. But what does he say next? The Christian tradition, in vain they do worship me, teaching doctrines, commandments of men by their own tradition. The Christian tradition now has never recognized the right to private property as absolute or inviolable. And has stressed the social purpose of all forms of private property. Let me read that again. The Christian tradition has never recognized the right to private property as absolute or inviolable, and has stressed the social purpose of all forms of private property. So again, you may have your private property, but if an individual or whomever or any government or whatever is in need, Christian tradition says we have never recognized the right to private property, so therefore you have to give it up because it's not yours. Your car is not yours. For you employers, your man or your maidservant, they're not yours. They belong to the church. They belong to Rome. This is why all of those companies, including small businesses, big businesses, all these companies, factory workers, and these types of things, these employers are going to have to eventually come to the conclusion that, hey, whatever is common for all, like for example, a day of rest, they're going to have to acknowledge it, or else they could see their company go down the wayside. Okay. Saint John Paul II forcefully reaffirmed this teaching, stating that God gave earth to the whole human race for the sustenance of all its members, without excluding or favoring anyone. Okay, that sounds right, but you have to take into account the Garden of Eden. Okay? By one man, sin entered into the world. And so once sin came in, how did sin come in? Via disobedience. Okay? The soul that sinneth, it shall die, right? You shall surely die if you take of this tree, right? So what happens is, and then you fast forward to the book of Proverbs, where it says, none of the wicked will inherit the earth, or it's the wicked that will be removed, and the righteous shall inherit the earth. Now, let me state this again. St. John Paul II forcefully reaffirmed this teaching, stating that God gave the earth to the whole human race. So he's including both believers and non-believers alike, for the sustenance of all its members, without excluding or favoring anyone. These are strong words. He noted that a type of development which did not respect and promote human rights, never mind, or natural law, throw aside the law of God. Forget about that. Human rights, personal and social, economic and political, including the rights of nations and of peoples, would not be really worthy of man. Let me repeat that. He noted that a type of development which did not respect and promote human rights, personal and social, economic and political, including the rights of nations and of peoples, would not be really worthy of man. So what does that elevate man as? Elevates man as to God's status. And also, if you do not go along with this, off with your head. You're a terrorist. You're a heretic. That is basically what is being said here. In a subtle way, of course. He clearly explained that the church does indeed defend the legitimate right to private property, but also she teaches no less clearly that there is always a social mortgage on all private property in order that goods may serve the general purpose that God gave them. Consequently, he maintained it is not in accord with God's plan that this gift be used in such a way that its benefits favor only a few. This calls into serious question the unjust habits of a part of humanity. The rich and the poor have equal dignity, for the Lord is the maker of them all. And he starts quoting scripture. Okay? This is the old added phrase when you look at the deception of Esau and Jacob and Esau, right? Okay? Here he's going to start quoting scripture. This is a very nice little tactic because Satan likes to do this too. Or the dragon. And the dragon gave the beast its seat and power and great authority. So, since the dragon quoted scripture to Jesus in the wilderness, well, guess what this little horn is going to do? Quote scripture to God's people in the wilderness. Like I said, it's the whole story of Jacob and Esau. Okay? The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. In other words, The scriptures are the Word of God. But the hand that's writing in the translations of these scriptures is the hand of Rome. That is very clever how they always present this in the light of Scripture. He himself made both small and great. Wisdom of Solomon 6:7. That's out of the Apocrypha. And he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good. Matthew 5:45. This has practical consequences, such as those pointed out by the bishops of Paraguay. Every campesino has a natural right to possess a reasonable allotment of land where he can establish his home, work for subsistence of his family, and secure life, regardless of who has a private property on that land. This right must be guaranteed so that its exercise is not illusory but real. That means that apart from the ownership of property, rural people must have access to means of technical education, credit, insurance, and markets. The natural environment is a collective good, the patrimony of all humanity, and the responsibility for everyone. If we make something our own, it is only to administer it for the good of all. If we do not, we burden our conscience with the weight of having denied the existence of others. That is why the New Zealand bishops asked what the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," means, when 20% of the world's population consumes resource at a rate that robs the poor nations and future generations of what they need to survive. So here, the Pope has taken his morality, mixing it in with God's morality, and saying because we don't share our goods with others, we are essentially killing them. And this has to be stopped. So we have to develop this system to where all private properties are under a social mortgage, and therefore that you have the duty to share in your private property. And if you do not, you're a heretic, you're a terrorist, off with your head, onto the stake. You think those doctrines changed? Oh, I don't think so. This is out of the new encyclical, ladies and gentlemen. This was released on earlier this month to the public. And I also just did another video regarding this encyclical on regarding the day of rest. Okay? And to backtrack on that, I mean, look, the day of rest, Sabbath and Sunday, it's not just a matter of a day, people. When you look at the commandments and you see that the only commandment in the Ten Commandments itself that specifically lists authority is the fourth commandment. Okay, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. For 6 days God created the heavens, the earth, the seas, and all them in them is, and rested on the seventh day. You know, so in it thou shalt not do no civil work. Know your maidservant, know your maidservant, know your ox, know your ass, you know, so on and so forth. Okay, that explicitly tells you the authority of God is within that fourth commandment. Now, when you go to the other side of the spectrum, you have the Roman Catholic Church, you have the papacy. They decided to change all the commandments by moving them all up one, getting rid of the second, which deals with graven images and idols, getting rid of the second, moving all of them up one, taking lots of words out of each commandment also, by the way, and switching the Sabbath day to the Lord's Day. And what does Rome tell you about Sunday? Sunday is our mark of authority. There was an article I listed in a video previously from the Lord's Day of Alliance where it states on the headline, Sunday is a mark of Christian unity. Sunday is a mark of our authority according to the church. Okay, so it's a question of authority. You have God's authority, and you have man's authority. Who are you going to elevate? You're going to elevate God, or are you going to elevate man? Via natural law and human rights, that is. Okay? And that is the sole principle of this headline here. In September, the UN launches a major sustainable development agenda for the entire planet. This article was covered exclusively on Hour of the Truth, and I want to give a shout out to him, by Walt Stickel of Inquisition Update and Jörg Glissman, if I said that right, who did a very, very fantastic job of covering this. I'm just going to read a portion of this article, and I'll provide a link to that radio broadcast in and of itself. Okay. Now, it goes on and states, the UN plans to launch a brand new plan for managing the entire globe at the Sustainable Development Summit that it will be hosting from September 25th to September 27th. I want to pause right there. And again, managing the entire globe. Do you know the Club of Rome and the UN have worked unanimously in getting this set up right here? The regionalized adaptive model of the global world system via the Club of Rome report. You scroll down, and the basic structure of the model, okay, as a world system is represented in terms of interacting regions with provisions made to investigate any individual country or sub-region in the context of regional and global development. Presently, the world system is represented by 10 regions. North America, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Japan, rest of developed world, Latin America, Middle East, rest of Africa, South and Southeast Asia, and China. What is this TPP all about? In order to be able to deal with the complex of factors involved and problematic in a way which is sound, credible, and systematic, a hierarchical structure has been adopted for the model in which each level in the hierarchy represents the evolution of the world system within a context defined by a given set of laws and principles. Specifically, the levels involved are geophysical, ecological, technological, man-made energy and mass transfers, economic, institutional, socio-political, value-cultural, human biological. And if you go one step further down here, on the micro level, 8 production sectors are recognized: agriculture, manufacturing, food processing, energy, mining, service, banking and trade, residential construction. This affects every single one of us here and now. Okay? A world population model has been constructed in terms of the same region as the economic model. This was back in 1978, I believe. An energy model has been constructed, which gives for each region the consumption and production of energy and inter-regional exchange of energy resources as a function of economic factors. Number 4, a food production and arable land use model has been constructed, which allows the assessment of a number of food-related issues, including the need and availability of phosphorus required for intensive agriculture, the consequences of timing and magnitudes of natural disasters such as drought, crop failure due to disease, etc. Okay, so the kingdoms, they literally call these 10 global groups kingdoms. All they got to do is get their little Herods in place, and voila, we have a fulfillment of prophecy. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure that out. All you got to do is open up the book. It's right there. Group 1, North America, would include Canada and the United States of America. Group 2, Western Europe, would include Andorra, Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Federal Republic of Germany, Finland, France, Great Britain, Greece, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, San Marino, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, Yugoslavia. Group 3 would include Japan. Group 4, rest of the developed market economies. Australia, Israel, New Zealand. Ooh, Israel. So does that mean Israel will have to succumb to the pressure, succumb to the dictates of Rome? Well, obviously they already have. So, yeah, that includes them. So does Israel and Zionism rule this world and these types of things, as a lot of these people like to claim. Nope. New Zealand, Oceania, South Africa, Tasmania. Group 5, Eastern Europe, Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, German Democratic Republic, Hungary, Poland, Romania, Soviet Union. Group 6, Latin America, includes all the Latin American countries. Group 7, North Africa and the Middle East, again, including all those nations there. Group 8, Main Africa, all the nations there. Group 9, South and Southeast Asia, all the nations within there. And Group 10, Centrally Planned Asia, Mongolia, North Korea, North Vietnam, People's Republic of China. So yes, it would include China. And here's the map readout of what this is supposedly supposed to look like. Some of the biggest names on the planet, including Pope Francis, will be speaking at this summit. This new sustainable agenda focuses on climate change, of course, but it also specifically addresses topics such as economics, agriculture, what did I just read? Education, and gender equality. For those wishing to expand the scope of global governance, sustainable development, gotta love that word, is the perfect umbrella because just about all human activity affects the environment in some way. The phrase, for the good of the planet, can be used as an excuse to micromanage virtually every aspect of our lives. So for those that are concerned about the growing power of the United Nations, this summit in September is something to keep an eye on. Never before have I seen such an effort to promote a UN summit on the environment. On this new sustainable development agenda is literally a framework for managing the entire globe. So, if you're not familiar with this new sustainable development agenda, the following is what the official United Nations website says about it. Quote, the United Nations is now in the process of defining sustainable development goals as part of a new sustainable development agenda that must finish the job and leave no one behind. No one behind? No one left behind? We can't have that. Left behind? This agenda, to be launched at the Sustainable Development Summit in September 2015, is currently being discussed at the UN General Assembly, where member states and civil societies are making contributions to the agenda. Here's a little tidbit of information which we will get into here relatively quickly. Did you know that the Pope is not officially a member of the United Nations? The papacy is not officially a member of the United Nations because the fact is that the papacy cannot be a member of any of these groups if they claim to be the ruler of them. The process of arriving at the post-2015 development agenda is member state-led with broad participation from major groups and other civil society stakeholders. There have been numerous inputs to the agenda, notably a set of sustainable development goals proposed by an open working group of the General Assembly, the report of an intergovernmental committee of experts of sustainable development financing, General Assembly dialogues on technology, facilitation, and many others. End quote. And then posted below are the 17 sustainable development goals that are being proposed so far. And I'm just going to go ahead and briefly go over these. End poverty in all its forms everywhere. And then when I go over what this TPP is, you're going to see the dots connecting with that as well. It's not just talking about free trade, folks. As much as you out there that like to rely on your mainstream media and your Democrats and Republicans to tell you the truth, it's not just that. End poverty in all its forms everywhere. End hunger. Achieve food security, improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. What do all these quotes from Thomas Aquinas and these encyclicals and Pope Francis' encyclical have in common? All you got to do is just look at these goals. It's right there. Ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Ensure inclusive and equitable equality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Well, if you go back to the Ten Commandments here, in the original one, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, and the Catholic Church changed it to I am the Lord your God, you shall not have strange gods before me, what did they leave out? Who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage? So what does that mean? Well, we cannot have a God that is separate from everything else, so we have to take the prayers out of school, we have to introduce evolution and these types of things, because I am the Lord your God could be any God, and not just the one specific God who brought the children out of the land of Egypt, the children of Israel. Because that would explain a direct deity, where by taking who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, out of the way, that makes anything can be your God. I am the Lord your God, you shall not have strange gods before me. And so therefore, you can take the prayers out of school. You can persecute those that are talking bad against the Quran. You can persecute all those. You can throw them in jail. You can qualify them as following hate speech. You can persecute and punish those that are holding Bible studies publicly on a school campus because, hey, we don't acknowledge one God. We acknowledge them all. Or we just acknowledge no God. That'll make no difference. Lifelong learning opportunities for all. Achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Promote, sustain inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. And it goes on and on and on. And I'll just, I'm going to skip the rest of them again. I will post the link to the radio broadcast that covered this in full. And I'm going to continue on here. Another thing that makes a new sustainable development agenda different is the unprecedented support that it is getting from the Vatican and from Pope Francis himself. Well, Pope Francis and the Vatican has always supported this whole thing from the very beginning. Again, all you got to do is look at the aspect of how they view private property and the universal destination of goods, and it's right there. It's the same old socialist, Marxist garbage. In fact, Pope Francis is actually going to travel to the UN and give an address to kick off the Sustainable Development Summit on September 25th. Quote, His Holiness Pope Francis will visit the UN on the 25th of September 2015 and give an address to the UN General Assembly immediately ahead of the official opening of the UN Summit for the adoption of the post-2015 development agenda. And what else is happening that week in September? You have the final lunar eclipse of the 4 blood moon tetrad, that everyone in their mother is just screaming, oh, that's gonna precede the rapture, oh, that's gonna precede Israel and the coming together of the Jews, Israel, and building the temple. And you know what, I don't see it as that. I see it as just a simple sign and a warning that things are about to get hot. And every single moon, every single one of these eclipses had something dramatic to do with Rome. Just prior to the, I think the first or second one, okay, you had the whole Protestant unity of coming back to Mother Rome via a video package from Pope Francis, Tony Palmer, and Kenneth Copeland. Right in the same window. You had the whole Russian-Ukrainian crisis happen right around the aspect of the 3rd blood moon. All of this is connected to Rome. And Also, now with this last one, you have this going on. Okay? The Pope has been very open about his belief that climate change is one of the greatest dangers currently facing our world. Just a couple of weeks ago, he actually brought UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to the Vatican to speak about climate change and sustainable development. Here's a summary of what happened. On April 28th, the Secretary General met with His Holiness Pope Francis at the Vatican and later addressed senior religious leaders along with the presidents of Italy and Ecuador, Nobel laureates, and leading scientists on climate change and sustainable development. Amidst an unusually heavy rainstorm in Rome, participants at the historic meeting gathered within the ancient Vatican compound to discuss what the Secretary General has called the defining challenge of our time. The mere fact that a meeting took place between religious and scientific communities on climate change was itself newsworthy. That it took place at the Vatican, was hosted by the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, and featured the Secretary General as a keynote speaker was all the more striking. Obviously, the major encyclical was already released, and I think that we can get a good idea of the kind of language that we will see in this encyclical from another Vatican document which was recently released. It is entitled Climate Change and the Common Good, and it was produced by the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences. The following is a brief excerpt. Unsustainable consumption coupled with a record human population and the uses of inappropriate technologies are causally linked with the destruction of the world's sustainability and resilience. Widening inequalities of wealth and income, the worldwide disruption of the physical climate system, and the loss of millions of species that sustain life are the grossest manifestations of unsustainability. The continued extraction of coal, oil, and gas, following the business-as-usual mode, will soon create grave existential risks for the poorest 3 billion and for generations yet unborn. Climate change, resulting largely from unsustainable consumption by about 15% of the world's population, has become a dominant moral, pay attention here, dominant moral and ethical issue for society. Whose morale? God's morale? Or the morale of Rome? There is still time to mitigate unmanageable climate changes and repair ecosystem damages, provided we reorient our attitude toward nature and thereby toward ourselves. Climate change is a global problem whose solution will depend on our stepping beyond natural affiliations and coming together for the common good. Such transformation changes in attitudes would help foster the necessary institutional reforms and technological innovations for providing the energy sources that have negligible effect on global climate, atmospheric pollution, and ecosystems. Thus, protecting generations yet to be born, religious institutions can and should take the lead in bringing about that change in attitude towards creation. How can you do that? Well, I don't know. Maybe a universal day of rest, perhaps? That could be a start now, couldn't it? The Catholic Church, working with the leadership of other religions, can now take a decisive role of mobilizing public opinion and public funds to meet the energy needs of the poorest 3 billion people, thus allowing them to prepare for the challenges of unavoidable climate and ecosystem changes. Such a bold and humanitarian action by the world's religions acting in unison is certain to catalyze a public debate over how we can integrate societal choices as prioritized under UN Sustainable Development Goals into sustainable economic development pathways for the 21st century with projected population of 10 billion or more. Under this Pope, the Vatican has become much more political than it was before, and sustainable development has become the Vatican's #1 political issue. Obviously, they've always been political because the beast that rises out of the sea and the 10-toed feet of iron and clay is a religio-political system, which means is a church and state combined. So, I mean, but this is a very good article to read, and it goes into pretty good detail. All you got to do is basically connect the rest of the dots, and you're there. Okay, now, is this all conjecture that, the U.S. is the beast out of the earth and is the image of the Vatican, or is the image of Rome? Is this all conjecture? Is this all conspiracy? Because obviously most people believe that this beast out of the sea is the Antichrist, and, this one-man Antichrist, and then the beast that rises up out of the earth is the false prophet. Okay, but is it more than that? Because a beast is a kingdom, so therefore it can't be just one man. And this beast that rises up out of the earth has two horns like a lamb, and it speaks as a dragon. And the earth represents a sparsely populated area, so right around the time of the deadly wound in 1798, 99, 1800, 1801, around in that time frame, you had the Declaration of Independence. You had France recognizing the U.S. as a independent nation. Okay, and from the very beginning, folks, she was speaking as a dragon. There wasn't a pause. Yes, America was founded on lamb-like principles in the aspect of the 13 colonies. Okay, and there are lamb-like principles within the Constitution. I understand that. But at the same time, who are the pens behind the Declaration of Independence? There are certain names left out that no one recognizes and no one seems to realize, and these names are in fact were and are Jesuits in nature. Jesuit trained, or a Jesuit in and of themselves. And they had a part in the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So right from the very beginning, the U.S. was speaking as a dragon. Sure, it has two horns like a lamb, and it has lamb-like principles. Now, back in 2011, this is a Italian webpage for America, SIO America. Okay. And it states, this is from June 2011. Sister City Agreement signed between Washington, D.C. and Roma, Italy. Italian-American Joe Grano witnesses a dream come true. Pay attention here. This is a very interesting article. Many years ago, Washington lawyer Joe Grano, after returning to Washington from a trip to Rome, Italy, realized that the two cities shared more than just their status as capital cities. Joe saw that the arts and architecture of the two cities were similar. Of course, but he also noted that perhaps those similarities were not accidental, but deliberate. As Joe explained to SIO America, the American founding fathers chose a republic as their preferred form of government after having studied extensively the Constitution of the Roman Republic. I'm going to provide a link to a mini documentary called Rome's Revenge, and you can kind of see how history is going to repeat itself. And George Washington was a Mason, and so were many others that were part and parcel of this. Once it was decided to create a new city for the seat of government, it was only natural that they chose Roman architecture for their main public buildings. This was a deliberate decision of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, who both were Masons. It is certainly not accidental that the three buildings that represent the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, i.e. the Capitol, the White House, and the Supreme Court building, are ultimately derived from Roman models. Can we say an image to the beast? Albeit too from an indirect route, Indeed, Jefferson highly recommended a rotunda for the new U.S. Capitol building. Joe Grano decided to act on his observations and over the years became the force behind efforts to join Rome and Washington in a sister cities agreement. Now you see why the Pope is going to be coming here on these shores, why the Antichrist is going to be coming here on these shores to address a joint session of Congress on the behalf of the American people. All you got to do is dig a little bit to see why. But obviously this goes far beyond this sister cities agreement. But this is just another dot, so to speak. But even before that campaign, Joe founded the Constantino Brumidi Society and began efforts to have, among others, Constantino Brumidi, the Michelangelo of the nation's capital, recognized by the U.S. Congress. Eventually, through his tireless efforts and his ceaseless potting of natural Italian-American organizations, Congress posthumously awarded Brumidi a Congressional Gold Medal. Now, moving further down the article here, the Sister Cities Agreement signed on Tuesday is the first step toward that many in Washington hope will be a strengthened relationship between the two capitals and the beginning of new projects and ventures of mutual interest. To mark the occasion, the famed Capitolina Venus, one of the best preserved sculptures to survive from Roman antiquity, will be on exhibit at the West Building Rotunda of the National Gallery of Art, where it will remain until September 5th. The Capitoline Venus, as a masterpiece measuring more than 6 feet in height, has only left Rome on only one other occasion. When Napoleon seized it in 1797, it was returned in 1816. Among the many Washington Italian-American personalities who attended the event were Anita McBride, Pina Scala, Oscar Bartoli, Francisco Isgro, and Melo Scala. And when you look at this Capitoline, you can really see some interesting variations of that little statue at the top of the Capitol in the U.S. and these types of things. And also, look at the history, folks. Look at that year, 1797. That was right before Napoleon's general, Berthier, abolished the papal states and established a secular state. And it was returned in 1816. Very, very interesting piece of history there. Okay. Now, let's go to the official U.S. Department of State. Remarks at the Sister City Agreement between Washington, D.C. and Rome, June 7, 2011. This was only 4 years ago, folks. This wasn't that long. Good afternoon, everyone. I am honored to be here today to witness the signing of the Sister City Agreement between Washington, D.C. and Rome. First, I would like to thank Mayor Gray and Mayor Alamano for inviting me here and signing this agreement today. Moving on further, Washington, D.C. and Rome make what could be described as a historic power couple. That just seems like it's prophecy fulfilled right there. One is the image of the other, right? Throughout world history, some of the most significant events have happened in these two cities. Moreover, both capitals are beacons of culture and diplomacy for their respective nations. To absorb this history and culture, Americans flock to Washington to marvel at the historic sites that are more than 200 years old. Meanwhile, Italians flock to Rome to marvel at historic sites that are more than 2,000 years old. Another aspect of culture is sports, and both cities are very passionate about their local sports teams. And though we love our teams, we must keep in mind that both Rome and Washington are the seats of government and the locations where influential world decisions are made. Let me repeat that one more time. Keep in mind that both Rome and Washington are the seats of government and the locations where influential world decisions are made. Therefore, some might say that in these cities, politics was, is, and always will be the sport of choice. Thus, I believe that the sister city relationship between Washington, D.C. and Rome will form strong bonds across a wide range of issues, including culture, history, and politics. There you have it. And come 2015 in September, need I say more? Let's take a look at another one from April 16th, 2015. The Holy See relations. U.S. relations with the Holy See. The Holy See is the universal government of the Catholic Church and operates from the Vatican City State. A sovereign, independent territory. The Pope is the ruler of both Vatican City State and the Holy See. The Holy See, as the supreme body of government of the Catholic Church, is a sovereign juridical entity under international law. The United States and the Holy See consult and cooperate on international issues of mutual interest, including human rights, peace and conflict prevention, poverty eradication, and development, environmental protection, and interreligious understanding. Since his inauguration, Pope Francis has acted as a global advocate for human dignity and justice, specifically in his emphasis on the moral imperative of ending trafficking in persons and caring for the poor and marginalized. The United States and the Holy See enjoy a positive relationship that serves to amplify a global message of peace, hope, and justice. Under what morality and under what law? Natural law, human rights, and the morale of the world, the morale of the Vatican. Again, here's another piece of interesting history. Just look at the dates mentioned here. The United States maintained consular relations with the Papal States from 1797 to 1870 and diplomatic relations with the Pope and his capacity as head of the Papal States from 1848 to 1868, though not at the ambassadorial level. These relations lapsed in 1870 with the loss of all papal territories during the unification of Italy. From 1870 to 1984, the United States did not have diplomatic relations with the Holy See. Several U.S. presidents, however, designated personal envoys to visit the Holy See periodically for discussions of international humanitarian and political issues. In 1984, a revised Concordat. A Concordat basically is recognizing Rome in layman's terms, or the Vatican, as the guy that runs the show, the boss. So the United States goes to the Pope for their official rulings. That's what a Concordat essentially is. A revised Concordat was signed defining the relations between the government and the church within Italy. The United States and Holy See announced the establishment of diplomatic relations in 1984. Now, the United States, the U.S. assistance to the Holy See, the United States provides no development assistance to the Holy See because it needs no development assistance because they are beyond development assistance. Because they are the richest institution in the whole world. They don't need it. And therefore, why would Babylon need any help? They don't need any help. All they need is the cooperation of their Herods, so to speak. Bilateral economic relations. The United States has no significant trade or investment with the Holy See. Why? Well, because, let's face it. Do you think they're going to willingly give away their sovereignty or property to the U.S. for trade and investment? No, I don't think so. The Holy See is and was their own investment. The Holy See's membership in international organizations. The Holy See and the United States both are members of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Now, pay attention to this one. The Holy See also is an observer to a number of international organizations of which the United States is a member. Now, as an observer, the Holy See is not a member because, again, if they claim to be the mother, then that means they claim to be the head of all these organizations, so therefore they observe what is going on, including the United Nations, Organization of American States, and World Trade Organization. Bilateral representation, the U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See is Kenneth F. Hackett. Other principal embassy officials are listed in the department's key official list. The Holy See maintains an apostolic nunciature, the equivalent of an embassy in the United States, at 3339 Massachusetts Avenue, Washington, D.C., 20008. And you can call them if you want. Telephone number 202-333-7121. Give them a call, see what they say. And one other thing. 10 reasons why you should oppose TPP. Now this is what brings it all together. Think of the Club of Rome reports with the 10 kingdoms. Think of all the encyclicals and the quotes from Thomas Aquinas and the encyclical from Pope Francis regarding the redistribution of goods and this whole sustainable development agenda for the entire planet. And then look at this. The U.S. Senate's passage of Trade Promotion Authority (TPA) legislation on May 22nd means that the TPA bill, also known as Fast Track, will soon be up for a vote in the House of Representatives. If the House follows suit and approves it, we can be certain that President Obama and his Republican supporters in Congress will move for expedited action on the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, both of which Obama has stated are top priorities of his administration. These twin transoceanic agreements are massive schemes that propose a very radical transformation of the global political economic system. And who is the boss? Who is at the helm of this? We just read a lot about him. And he sits on a throne, and he likes to call himself God, and he likes to think that he changes times and laws. He's labeled as a little horn. He's labeled as the man of sin. He's labeled as that wicked. He is the Antichrist, the Judas priest, the Pope of Rome. With revolutionary integration and convergence of the major Atlantic and Pacific nations, the TPP currently includes 12 Pacific Rim member states: Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, the United States, and Vietnam, but is expected to expand to include more nations, including Communist China. Ooh. The Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP, proposes to begin deep and comprehensive integration between the 28 member states of the European Union and the United States. Over the course of the past several years, we have published many articles detailing the dangers posed by these still officially secret agreements. We are bringing together here in abbreviated terms 10 of those reasons why every American, whether identifying as Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Independent, Tea Party, Liberal, Conservative, or Constitutionalist, should oppose both of these proposals. Sovereignty will be lost. The Trans-Pacific Partnership and Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership constitute an all-out assault on an non-existent threat to American sovereignty and independence. Even if all the glowing economic predictions and rosy job promises of the TTIP promoters were true, and as we show below, there are many good reasons to disbelieve this prosperity propaganda. Would it really be worth sacrificing our national sovereignty and independence for these purported benefits? Would it be worth sacrificing our liberty and our Constitution? Would it be worth subjecting ourselves and our posterity to the rule of international bureaucrats and judges? Those are not idle, speculative questions. They go to the core of what the TPP and TTIP are all about. And all you got to do is look at quotes after quote after quote after quote of how the papacy, the Catholic Church, views our Constitution, views our sovereignty, our independence, our, well, what used to be separation of church and state. And Again, you will see who is going to benefit from this. The TPP and TTIP are living, evolving agreements. On November 12, 2011, the leaders of the TPP nations endorsed the TPP trade ministers' report to leaders, which states, inter alia, we have agreed to develop the TPP as a living agreement. Therefore, the TPP teams are establishing a structure, institutions, and processes that allow the agreements to evolve. We envision a continuing joint work program, including new commitments. Okay. Number 3, this is being planned in secret. The Obama administration has audaciously claimed that the TPP and TTIP processes are completely transparent, and President Obama has publicly claimed to be peeved by false charges, he says, that there is any secrecy involved. But the president is talking utter nonsense. If facts mean anything, it is a fact that after more than 3 years of secret negotiations, the administration still has not made the draft text of either of the agreements available to the public. It is a fact that the only texts the public has had access to are those that have been illegally leaked. It is a fact that elected members of the U.S. Congress are only allowed to see the text under severely restricted conditions. They must go to a special room, must leave their cell phones behind, may not make any copies, are monitored while in the room, and before leaving must surrender all notes they have taken. On the other hand, it is also a fact that private, cleared representatives of, for example, pharmaceutical companies, Hollywood studios, Wall Street, and other corporate interests are given passwords to access the documents online at their leisure, no restrictions, inconvenience, or humiliation for these privileged elitists. And who operates and runs these Hollywood studios, pharmaceutical companies, Wall Street, other corporate interests? Who runs them? The Jesuits, the Jesuitical order. So, of course, they will have access to the documents online at their leisure because they said so. Because they're the ones that drummed it up. This secrecy charge is not merely some invention of right-wing Republicans. It comes also from progressives of Obama's party, Oregon Senator Ron Wyden, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, Florida Representative Alan Grayson, Connecticut Representative Rosa DeLauro, California Representative George Miller, and many others. There is nothing to hide. Why does the administration insist on shrouding the entire process in secrecy and then ludicrously pretend they are being totally open and transparent? The TPP and TTIP are not about free trade. Historically, the free trade debate has centered on reducing or eliminating taxes on imports, but U.S. tariffs are already at historic lows. If the TTIP and TPP were truly about free trade and tariffs, they could be written in a few pages, but they purportedly are hundreds of pages long. This is because they deal with what the globalization lobby calls non-tariff barriers to trade, which can be just about anything and everything. Here are some of the things U.S. trade representative websites list as matters that are covered by the TTIP. Agricultural market access, competition, cross-border services, customs and trade facilitation, electronic commerce and telecommunications, energy and raw materials, environmental financial services, government procurement, intellectual property rights, investment labors, rules of origin, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, sectoral annexes, regulatory cooperation, small and medium-sized enterprises, state-owned enterprises, technical barriers to trade, textiles, trade remedies. And remember, as discussed above in number 2, since these are living, evolving agreements, virtually anything may be added for consideration in the future. No less an authority than WTO Director General Pascal Lamy has remarked on the revolutionary nature of TTIP. Okay. So with all those things I just mentioned, what does that mean about the individual? It means it affects every individual in this country, whether you know it or you do not know it. And if you do not go along with this, if you remain to be a separatist, if you remain to be exclusive from all these things instead of being inclusive for the good of the planet, you will eventually be rooted out as a terrorist, or, inquisitional terms, a heretic, which is defined as deciding for oneself what one may believe. This is what it all boils down to. It all boils down to a fast track to the mark of the beast. It all boils down to the final nails in the coffin to bring about these 10 divided kingdoms. These 10 kingdoms, these 10 Herods, and these 10 kings finally placed. And when everything is in place, folks, guess what? It is going to be for a very short time, where the kings will have power with 1 hour with the beast. So there is going to be a global unity. It's not going to last long, because none of these global peace treaties last long in the first place. And you think this one is going to? No, it's not. Because what's going to come about is the plagues will fall. And when the plagues will fall, they are going to blame those that are here. They're going to blame those Christians that have been warning and shouting this stuff from the rooftop from the very beginning. This is why this climate change and global warming is so connected with prophetic events, because it basically defines what these tentacles that are proceeding out of the Vatican is doing. And again, Psalms 91, folks. I'm not going to read the rest of these. I'll provide the links for them in the description box below. But Psalms 91 is vitally important. Again, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and of a sound mind. 1,000 will fall at thy left, and 10,000 at thy right, but it will not come nigh thy dwelling. And although some of you, through the will of God, might be called to be a martyr, don't worry about what you are to say, for the Holy Ghost will speak through you, and Jesus Christ will be with you. How do you think these people back in the Reformation time, when they were being roasted, basically on a slow cooker, some of these people were still able to praise God, were still able to glorify God in the midst of suffering this torment? It is humanly impossible for someone to ignore such pain and agony. So who was with them? God was with them through and through. And they believed it, and so should we. And if you are called to suffer a martyr's death, well, that's one of the greatest blessings and rewards you can have. No, I'm not trying to say go out there purposely and try to get yourself killed. But at the same time, we need to be harmless as doves and wise as serpents. Because things are going to get hot. They're going to get hot real quick. And are you going to be ready for these things that are going to come upon the earth? If you're wallowing in false doctrines of a futuristic idea of escapist theology, if you're wallowing in the doctrines of dispensationalism, if you're wallowing in the aspects of a gap theory in between the 69th and 70th week of Daniel, my advice to you is to pray. And pray earnestly that you can see the deception that is before you. Because things are a lot closer than you think. And rather they decide to go with a counterfeit 70th week, I don't know. It sure seems like that they want to do that too. With a counterfeit Antichrist, so that these people that have believed in this certain futuristic doctrine would accept another Christ that would come after this counterfeit Antichrist, and he would be the real Antichrist, and that would be the Pope of Rome. Right now, everyone that is believing in this futuristic doctrine believes he's nothing but just a false prophet, that he doesn't fulfill the criteria of Antichrist. That, my friends, I believe is a strong delusion that God himself said he was going to send. Because they want to believe a lie, God's going to give it to them. Because they want to believe what their pastors on the pulpit is teaching them. And folks, what's coming down the pike, we need to be aware of. And we need to be watching. Remember, all of the Bible is written for us. It's written for our time, including all of Revelation, including all of Matthew 24, including all of Mark 13 and Luke 21. And we are going to be here through all of it. The book of Revelation is history written in advance. Okay? And so is prophecy. Prophecy is history written in advance. So that when we see these things come to pass, then we can gladly lift up our heads and realize who's the one in sole control. And therefore he will protect us and he will guide us through these things. We have to believe it. We have to not fear the dictates of man or governments and these types of things. As scary as these things may seem, this is only a temporary dwelling. We got an eternal dwelling waiting for us on the other side. Truth be told, truth be known, stay safe. God bless. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Complete list, the actual commandments, right here on the far left. Okay? And for those that are not aware, I'm just going to sum this up quick. Is they basically what they have done is they have removed the entire second commandment. Okay, and they moved everything up one. So basically, the fourth commandment becomes the third commandment. The third commandment becomes the second commandment, and so on and so forth. And so then what they did was they took the 10th commandment and they split it in two. And this video is kind of going to go exclusively into the 10th commandment here. Okay? And which is the aspect of not coveting. Now, I apologize that this isn't verbatim from the King James Version, but if you translate the these and the thys and the thous, you pretty much get the same aspect. And the 10th commandment states, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, or anything that is your neighbor's. Now, if you were to transfer this into modern times, your manservant or your maidservant would be your employees. People that work for you, or that you work for them. Okay. As far as the chain of command goes in any given workplace, rather you have people that work under you and stuff like that. You're not to covet their means, their needs of anything. Okay, you're not to want to have what they have. Okay. Now, if you go to the Ten Commandments via the Catholic Church, what they did is they just put you shall not covet your neighbor's wife as a 9th commandment, and you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. Okay. But what did they leave out? Well, your house is gone, right? Your manservant or your maidservant is gone. Your ox is gone. Your ass is gone. And your ox is basically how you till the ground, your physical labor, means of equipment and these types of things. And your ass, in today's terms, would be your transportation, your vehicle. So your vehicle's gone. Okay, but what they do is they put, you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. That's kind of tricky. Because in recent encyclicals, you read about the destination of goods, and they talk about private property, and it sounds good. But what they do is they say, unless you can have private property, you can make the payments and these types of things, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily yours. If someone is in need, it is not a sin for them to come and take what you have because they need it. Okay? And we see a lot of things going on with this climate change aspect, and that we share all the Earth's resources, and that we have to realize that. And this is all in unison with the whole TPP thing that's going on, that pretty much has already passed, and the UN Climate Sustainable Agenda that they are going to be deciding on in September. Now, what else is happening in September is not only the Pope is going to be visiting the United Nations to address them, he's also going to be visiting the United States and speak on behalf of the American people in a joint session of Congress. And how interesting it is that you had this encyclical released, you had this TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Program, which is labeled as free trade, but what it is basically to expedite more jobs overseas and these type of things, but it goes beyond that, because it's going to affect every little aspect of your lives. Now, why? Well, because, other nations of the world have need, right? So, and that's the reason why, well, for example, your manservant or your maidservant is gone. Okay? There are other countries out there that are in need of these employment opportunities. Same thing with your ox or your ass. With your ass, your mode of transportation. You buy a car, you're making payments on it, and these types of things. Sure, you pay it off, but what's it connected to? It's connected to a license plate and these types of things. So really, do you actually own your vehicle? No, you do not. Okay? Where if someone has need of it, they can have it. If someone has need of your property, your housing, I think it's called squatting, I believe. It's perfectly okay. And it's not a sin, because they're not literally stealing, because they have need. And you have to succumb to their need. All this is basically a socialist and Marxist ruse, basically. And this is how the Catholic Church operates. Alright? So, I figured I'd start you off with that. Now, before I go into the two articles within the recent encyclical, I figured it would be interesting to see what other popes have said in previous encyclicals. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Okay. And this is from Article 42 in Pope John Paul II's encyclical from 1987, Solicitudo Rei Socialis, Socialism. Okay. And it states as following. Okay, today, more than in the past, of Church's social doctrine must be open to an international outlook in line with the Second Vatican Council. The most recent encyclicals, and particularly in line with the encyclical which we are commemorating, it will not be superfluous, therefore, to re-examine and further clarify in this light the characteristic themes and guidelines dealt with by the Magisterium in recent years. Again, this is from Pope John Paul II. Okay, I'd like to welcome you to yet another video, and things just keep on popping up and the events just keep on connecting, as far as dots go. If you remember, about a week or so back, I did a video regarding the now released papal encyclical via Pope Francis, and I went on to state that and this was verbatim according to a Jesuitical website, that this encyclical is going to pattern off of prior encyclicals that not only is dealing with the environment and economics and everything, but the socialist agenda of the redistribution of goods for under natural law for the common good of all. Okay, and sure enough, as you see before you, before you here, this is the encyclical, and this is chapter 6, article 93, the common destination of goods. Okay, and before I get into that, I'm also going to show you a lot of quotes with other popes that have basically used the same ideology. Now, why are they using this ideology? Okay, well, what I have before you here is straight verbatim off the Vatican webpage, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, Section 2, the Ten Commandments, and they're so arrogant in their statements of changing it that they actually